On September 1st, 1979, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration required auto manufacturers to build speedometers that only show a maximum speed of 85 miles an hour to better incentivize safer driving habits. Less than 3 years later, on March 25th, 1982, the NHTSA revoked this rule because they found it to be unhelpful in improving safety statistics. Today, these first-generation 280ZX speedometers are highly desirable due to having a face that reads up to 130 miles an hour. Finding one in clean and functional condition is next to impossible, and those that are available can cost hundreds of dollars. Luckily for me, a friend of mine happened to own a broken one in his parts stash and was willing to sell it to me for dirt cheap. In this video, I will show the complete removal, inner part swapping, and install process for the swap. Something worth noting, however, is that the first generation odometer only displays a 5-digit number instead of the 6-digit number on the newer year clusters. Disconnecting the battery helps prevent you from accidentally honking the horn during disassembly, along with stopping shortages from damaging irreplaceable parts. Behind the horn pad is a 22mm nut that holds the steering wheel onto the column. Beginning with the wheel pointed perfectly straight and marking its position on the shaft ensures that it will go back on correctly. Removing the clamshell housing from the column exposes the turn signal mechanism, which is only held on with one screw. Remove the 4 screws that hold the cluster onto the dashboard and begin pulling straight towards you. A plastic pry bar is an easier and safer alternative to using a screwdriver. Be mindful of the lip on the inside of the dashboard pad catching and grabbing onto the gauge cluster. With the cluster halfway out, you can now reach behind the cluster and disconnect the speedometer cable by twisting and pulling. This should then give you more room to access the electrical connectors on the back of the circuit board, which are held on by friction alone, and can be very tight and difficult to remove. Extreme care must be taken to prevent pins from breaking off. A pocket screwdriver can be used to help remove the round one, so long as you go slow and are very careful. Before I can install the new speedometer, I have to repair it first. Taking it apart revealed that at some point, the gears inside had seized, causing one of the worm drive gears to strip its teeth off. Although the two speedometers are different, the two worm drive gears on the inside are the same, allowing me to restore functionality to the odometer. Thoroughly cleaning and lubricating the individual components restores the rest of the mechanism back to factory condition, and is now ready to be installed in the original cluster. Since my car doesn't have the onboard diagnostic systems found in the higher trim models, I decided to take the opportunity and repurpose the warning eye hole for a better spot to relocate my AEM wideband O2 sensor gauge from its previous location where the clock used to be. Not much clearancing is needed to make the gauge pod fit in the back of the gauge cluster, however the gauge itself requires much more modification, most notably the relocation of the power, ground, and signal wires to the bottom to make room for the gauge cluster circuit board. To disassemble the cluster, start from the backside and remove the screws that hold the circuit board in place. A little wiggling and bending is needed to disconnect the circuit board from the tachometer pins inside, and to allow the fuel and temperature gauges to clear the housing. Extreme care must be taken during this process as the needles on all 4 gauges are very fragile. The decorative shroud over the face is held on with screws and 2 metal clips at the top, which can then be carefully removed with a pocket screwdriver. Swapping the gauges over in both of the gauge clusters is very easy, as they are essentially modular in design, requiring no special tools other than a single size Phillips screwdriver. The reassembly process is also easy, but remember to be as careful as you can as to not break the needles off. Starting with the temperature gauge, slightly bend and twist the circuit board back into place, and firmly press the pins for the tachometer back into place as well. I also took this opportunity to polish the acrylic gauge cover and to remove the unsightly fuel warning sticker. Reinstalling the cluster is easier than removing it. However, reconnecting the round connector is very difficult. With the 2 notches aligned, push the connector back onto the pins. It will require a lot of force, so be mindful of where you grab onto and where you push from. From there, it's as simple as following the removal process in reverse. The speedometer cable can be a little tricky to pull back into place, but not impossible. The turn signal mechanism mount bracket has a small finger on it that fits into a notch on the column. After reconnecting the battery and a quick test to make sure it powers on, it's now time for a road test. Working!
First time I get to see over 80.